Welcome back. My name is Chris Laidlaw. I'm the registered dietitian and a professional home economist working at Twin Bridges Nurse Practitioner-Led Clinic. Thank you for listening in again today. Are you still wondering about what to serve for supper tonight? As I'm coming closer to the end of the week and still have a few more days before my grocery outing, my pantry is starting to look a bit sparse. And it may happen to you as well with our social distancing and reduced grocery trips. Tonight, I'm having a Meatless Monday. It's a great way to stretch my shopping a few more days. I'm using some non-perishable, canned or dried beans or legumes, and it's also a really good way of stretching my dollars because it's an inexpensive meal option. Canada's Food Guide recommends to us to include plant-based proteins in our diet. This isn't a good example of how we can do that. Let's begin and explore. Pulses and legumes are high in fiber. They're a source of calcium and protein. 1 cup has approximately 12 to 15 grams of protein, and it varies a bit from bean to bean. It's a good source of energy. So if you have a diagnosis of diabetes, remember, pulses and legumes are a source of carbohydrate to include in your meal planning options. Always when we're using the canned option, we want to rinse our beans to reduce some of the salt content. And that may be things like our lentils, our chickpeas, or our black beans that I have here today. It's important to notice that from manufacturer to manufacturer, the texture may change a bit, and you may notice that in your recipes. I like to use the dry bean option. When I'm cooking in dry beans, we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But a good conversion for your recipe is 1 19-ounce can equals approximately 2 cups of homemade beans. And I'm including some tips and steps on how to cook from dry beans with our upload today. Don't forget our handy Instapot. It's a convenient way to cook dried legumes, and I've come to just explore a lot of different beans with this, and I find it's really quick and handy. So a dietitian tip for you, be sure to cook the whole package when you're cooking in the Instapot or when you're cooking on the stovetop. As beans and legumes freeze really well, they can be frozen whole or they can be mashed. Also, they're a little sidebar, they're a good way to replace some of the fat when we're baking. We can replace half the fat fat in our recipe or oil with approximately the same amount of lentil puree. We can add a cup of chickpeas to a salad. We can make those chickpeas into hummus and serve with raw vegetables, or we can use as a sandwich spread with some herbs on a tortilla. Have you considered using half a cup of black beans with a cup of salsa? It's a really tasty option. Or as we explored in one of our cooking sessions at the clinic, you can season chickpeas and roast them in the oven. They're a great alternative for snacking. You will notice though often when you're using chickpeas, especially if you're making burgers, they talk about a food processor. Don't fret if you don't have a food processor. I have a couple tips for you. You can simply mash beans in a bowl with a potato masher. Or a little bit more fun, add them to a resealable bag and roll them with a rolling pin or a large can such as a juice, a canned juice. And this is something you can involve your family with as well and perhaps reduce a little bit of stress unexpectedly. If you would like to keep a lentil recipe totally vegan, you can mix 2 tablespoons of flax or ground flax with approximately 6 tablespoons of water. Let it sit for 15 minutes, and that's a great substitute for egg. That also comes in handy if you're stretching your grocery trip a few more days and eggs have all been used up. You can simply grind flax seeds if you have them in your coffee grinder, but always store in the refrigerator or freezer for optimal freshness. As I've included several recipe ideas for you to consider on our website, I want to share with you what we're having tonight at my house. Oven meatless meatballs. You can use either chickpeas, white beans, black beans, or kidney beans. They all work really well with this recipe. And this recipe was originally found on osteoporosis.ca. If you tend to use kidney beans, and kidney beans are an example here, it has a beefier look, more traditional meatballs. You can enjoy them on top of pasta, in a tomato sauce, on top of a salad, in a pita, or simply with a dip, and that's a very kid-friendly option. Recently, I had viewed Emily Richards, a well-known home economist and cookbook author, showcase these meatballs, and I watched as she created a simple creamy mushroom sauce for her meatballs. Now, because of COVID-19 and our pandemic situation, her milk supply was a bit low, so she had substituted skim milk powder, and you can do that in any recipe that calls for fluid milk. 1 cup of water plus 1/3 of a cup of dry skim milk powder reconstitutes to 1 cup of fluid milk. Also, she explored using evaporated milk as part of the milk in her sauce recipe. Here is what I recall. She heated a small amount of olive oil in a pan, added fresh mushrooms, and it looked to be about 2 cups, and she let them cook so that some of the moisture may be reduced and the flavor to be enhanced in the mushrooms. Then she added about 2 tablespoons of flour, stirring to lightly brown the flour, and then added her milk. And she used a combination of her evaporated milk and her reconstituted skim milk powder and some broth. And that equaled about 4 cups in my estimation. You may wish to actually refer to a recipe, but it did look very enticing, and she used her white bean ovenless meatballs in this recipe. As we continue to cook from foods in our pantry, it's time to experiment. I am personally going to try grinding some chia seeds as a substitute for my ground flax, as my pantry supply is starting to dwindle. I can always use an egg for binder, and I would benefit from that little bit extra protein and fiber from the chia seeds. 3 tablespoons of chia seeds provides approximately 11 grams of fiber and 5 more grams of protein. Earlier, we talked about sheet pan meals in another video. This meatball recipe is ideal for sheet pan. Be sure though to put down your parchment for easy meal prep and that your ovenless meatballs do not stick. Don't forget about eggs for Meatless Mondays. Eggs are a powerhouse of nutrition and a great source of protein. And again, another relatively inexpensive protein source, and they work well in your refrigerator from week to week between grocery shopping adventures. I've included several more recipes for you to consider and explore, and I've even included a Mexican crockpot casserole recipe. I hope you find some of these ideas interesting and try Meatless Monday at your house. Be patient, be kind, have fun,